Welcome to this third video in our short series on writing a compiler for BF.NET. In the first two videos, we created a simple interpreter for our language. The interpreter accepts our program from a command line prompt and then runs through it command by command, evaluating straight away. Our long-term aim is to write a compiler that's going to generate IL code. But for the moment, we're going to do an intermediate step where we're just going to generate some C# code, which is then going to give us an idea of the IL we actually want to generate eventually. So, since the last video, I pushed the changes up into GitHub and just tidied up the code slightly. For this video, we're going to start with a new project, so I've called it BF to C#, which again is a console app. And eventually we're going to do it so we can pass in the name of a program to compile, but for the moment I'm just going to hard code the instructions we're interested in. And what should we do? Let's have why don't we stick with our hello world example. So we've got a couple of choices here, and I was in two minds about which way to go with this. Normally when you're writing a compiler, you normally have a sort of a lexing and a parsing stage where you identify the symbols in your language and then parse them to provide some sort of meaning to them. In this case, our language is so simple because each command is always one character long and we've got no parameters and so on. We sort of can miss out on those steps. However, by not having any intermediate representation, it means it's going to make things like optimization of our code at a later date a bit harder. But for now, I'm going to do the simplest possible thing, and I'm just going to loop through each thing and generate it into C#. So what we can do is, I think we can just look at each instruction in turn, and then depending on the symbol we see, is the action we can take. So I'll start off with plus first of all. That's so simple. Hold that. First of all, so that's going to move our data pointer one place to the right. So what we want to do is init C#. So the C# code we're going to want now is just going to be data pointer equals data. So that's the C# code we're going to want to generate. Likewise, we go left. Our plus sign. So what we're going to do is, last time although we added the class to represent our tape, for the moment we're going to go back to just using a simple array in the tape. So we're going to say the value in there is going to be that value plus 1. And we can decrement the value. So now we've got the ones for user input and output, which is, we've got our code from before, it's these two. So we've got dot, which means we write out the current value. So one, two, I think that's correct. And then we've got comma, which is read in a value. And then we've got the more interesting one, which is the loop. And it turns out the loop is actually a bit easier in this case, because when we start the loop, the only code we now need to emit is while the value in here. Make sure we get this right around. So we do the loop until the pointer is 0. So whilst it's not equal to 0, we then have our loop, and our final command is the end of the loop, which is the easiest one yet, because that's just going to be our C# loop terminator. Because C# is going to take care of our nested loops and so on, because we can have a loop within a loop. Okay, so now we need to actually write our emit C# code. In fact, what we can do is we can do that as a local function in here. So what can we do? Probably we can have a string builder. So we just keep building up the string builder with new commands, and then once we get to the final bit, we can then write out a file. Run all the text. And what we will call this? Yeah, so we're going to call it program.cs. So again, we'd probably pass in as a command line parameter where we're going to create the file, but for now, I shall hard code a folder. Okay, let's see what that gives us. Okay, it's generated something. Let's have a look at it. Okay, so that's generated us some C#. Okay, so obviously it doesn't compile at the moment because we haven't got the namespace and the class declaration, the method name at the top, and we also haven't declared any of our variables. So that's the next thing we need to do. So we sort of have this, well, we'll probably take one from here. We have this sort of preamble at the top, which we're going to need to include, which is going to be the same for each of our programs. So I guess we can have another something like that. So we have a header that goes to the top. And then we need some fine common code to go to the bottom as well, which, so we need to finish the namespace, class and method, to be fair then. footer, I'm not sure what to call that. Oh dear, what have I done wrong? Ah, it's that program. Okay, that's looking a bit better. So now we still get some errors because we haven't declared any of our variables, so let's do that next. So in here we're going to need our data pointer, which will start with 5000, and we need our tape, which is going to be an array of bytes. Okay, that's, if I had the casing right, it would compile. But the other thing we could do is actually indent some of these values. So so we need to have 3 indents. So we've got data pointer at the moment. So we can repeat. So we need to keep track of how many indents we've got. So indents is 3, so we start off with 3, and then whenever we go into a loop, we increase the number of indents by 1. And then as we come out of the loop, we decrease the indents by 1. And then when we're generating our code here on the front, we have to add okay, we'll try that. Delete our file again. Okay, that's looking better. We've just got a cast missing here. This is a one we've had before. When you add 1 to our value, even though that's a byte, you could overflow bytes. We have to explicitly convert it back into a byte again. So that'll be on the add and the minus. And then the other thing we're going to need is the project file itself. So a project file is going to look a bit like our example one here, which is just that. Too many programs now. No. So that generates our C# code. So we probably want a method there that is generate project file. And again, for now, we're going to do the simplest possible thing, which is we're just going to write out the text. So, there we go. we probably want our file name. And then our file up here. Okay, so there we go. So we can open our project. So our code looks like it compiles. Let's see if it runs. It's finally running. And there, it's printed out hello world. So our compiled C# is working as we'd hope. So in our next video we will start tidying this code up a bit and having it so it can be driven by some command line arguments instead of hard-coded data and hard-coded paths and so on. Thank you for watching.